Just before dawn on November 5th, 2025, Puerto Cabello was wrapped in a heavy Caribbean haze when a Venezuelan Navy patrol squadron slipped out of port under absolute radio silence. Four fast attack craft knifing across the dark water, each armed with thundering 12.7mm heavy guns and aging Soviet 73mm launchers, all still with new orders. Their mission was simple on paper but dangerous in reality. Intercept what they believed was a lone American destroyer trespassing into Bolivarian waters. But from the very first mile, the deck was already stacked against them. Their intel was stale, 2 days old, and disastrously incomplete. The target they thought they were stalking wasn't a lone US warship at all. It wasn't even close. Out there, beyond the horizon, the radar signature waiting for them belonged to something far larger and infinitely more lethal, the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, a nuclear-powered beast of a carrier weighing nearly 1,000,000 tons, and surrounded by an armored ring of 6 escort ships ready to tear apart anything threatening its path. At 5:21 a.m. aboard the Eisenhower, radar operators spotted faint southern echoes on their scopes, tiny contacts, fast, scattered, punching through the low sea clutter. Definitely not commercial, definitely not harmless. The captain didn't hesitate. His voice was calm, practiced, deadly in its certainty. Let's light them up. Instantly, the destroyers Gravely and Mason broke formation to create a forward shield in front of the carrier, their hulls cutting through the swell as weapons crews snapped to full alert. Rotating turrets hissed into standby. The air felt electrically charged, the kind of tension only sailors who've trained for war can truly recognize. Meanwhile, aboard the Venezuelan lead craft, Na-23, its commander pushed the throttle past 40 knots. They still believed they were chasing a single destroyer running without escort. Their radar operator, tired eyes glued to foggy screens, never noticed the towering radar signature hidden behind the smaller one. The carrier's colossal outline simply blended with sea clutter and atmospheric distortion, an easy mistake but a deadly one. By 5:48, the Venezuelan squadron broke radio silence and sent their warning. "You are entering Bolivarian waters. Change course immediately." The only reply was cold American silence. A minute later, the sea haze thinned and the silhouettes ahead finally sharpened. What they thought would be the tall mast of a destroyer instead rose into a floating fortress of steel, elevators, hangar doors, towering island superstructure, a runway at sea. That was the moment every sailor on the Naguata 2-3 understood the magnitude of their mistake. They hadn't intercepted a straggling US destroyer, they had charged headfirst into the heart of a fully armed US Navy carrier strike group. What the Venezuelan crew saw next would freeze any seasoned sailor. At the center of the formation loomed the Eisenhower herself, a nuclear-powered giant with 4.5 acres of armored flight deck and nearly 70 aircraft tucked under her command. To her crew, she was a roaming self-contained city. To anyone reckless enough to provoke her, she was a thunderstorm forged in steel. Flanking her were the destroyers, Gravely and Mason, each carrying over 90 vertical launch cells packed with tomahawks, sea sparrows, and every tool needed to erase threats before they could blink. Farther out, the cruiser Philippine Sea quietly ran overwatch, her sensors sweeping a reach of hundreds of miles. Above it all, MH-60R Seahawks patrolled the skies, dipping sonars and infrared cameras hunting for anything fast and hostile on the surface. Inside the carrier's Combat Information Center, everything was stitched together into one synchronized ocean-wide picture. Satellite feeds, radar sweeps, sonar returns. Every ship saw the Venezuelan boats at the exact same moment. The system tagged them immediately. Skunk Alpha 1 through 4, 4 fast movers. Speed 40+ knots. Closing. The order that rippled through the strike group was simple and cold. Maintain course. Do not fire unless fired upon. It was an old rule, forged from decades of standoffs. The US Navy didn't shoot first. But they'd make sure you understood how close you were to crossing a line you couldn't uncross. By 5:52, Tension tightened across the Gravely CIC like a drawn cable. Radar plots showed the contacts accelerating, keeping a hard, steady bearing. No hesitation, no evasive movement. These weren't smugglers trying to hide. They were coming in direct, deliberate. The Gravely's captain made his call. Broadcast on emergency channel. A stern American voice cut across the waves. Venezuelan vessels. This is a United States Navy warship. You are operating in international waters. Alter course immediately. Silence answered him. Instead of turning, the Venezuelan formation split into a tactical pincer, 2 boats speeding wide, 2 staying low in the wave troughs. That wasn't random drift or confused steering. That was controlled maneuvering. On Eisenhower's deck, crews scrambled as another Seahawk spun up. Moments later, it soared skyward, climbing to 500 feet with its cameras, scanning the white trail streaking toward the carrier group. 4 patrol craft painted naval grey, Venezuelan flags snapping in the wind, guns mounted forward and manned. At 6-1, aboard the Venezuelan lead craft, their radar sheet, printed and outdated, still identified Echo 2 as a single American destroyer operating alone. Their mission was supposed to be simple. Buzz close, fire warning bursts into the water, record it, and hand Caracas a propaganda victory. But the sea had shifted during the night, and with it, the American fleet. Echo 2 wasn't a destroyer anymore. It was the Eisenhower, the most dangerous ship they could possibly stumble into. From the Naguata 2-3's bridge, the truth settled like a weight on every chest. The silhouette ahead was too massive, too flat, too tall to be anything but an aircraft carrier. Their radar scope wasn't showing 2 ships side by side, it was showing the gigantic echo of one. The Americans were already at full alert. Destroyers moved to block. Choppers hovered overhead, sensors locked on. And then the Venezuelans fired 2 short bursts into the water, just for show, they thought. But against a carrier strike group already on high readiness, muzzle flashes were not theatrics, they were triggers. The moment those muzzle flashes cracked across the waves, the situation transformed. Gravely's fire control radar snapped onto the Venezuelan boats instantly. Every system that had been quietly tracking now locked with lethal precision. Inside the patrol craft, alarms howled. Their consoles lit with tones they had only heard during drills, missile lock warnings, hard and undeniable. In less than a minute, the Venezuelan crews understood the disaster unfolding. They hadn't intimidated an American warship. They had just threatened an entire carrier strike group, armed and authorized to defend itself without hesitation. Their commander tried to salvage the moment, breaking across the radio with a trembling voice. Seas approach! Seas approach! Disengage! But the sea had already crossed the invisible line where fear and misunderstanding ignite. And on board the Eisenhower, the call rolled across the ship like a steel curtain. Condition 1. Weapons free for self-defense. There were no sirens, no Hollywood theatrics, just professional, deadly calm. On the Gravely, sailors climbed into the 5-inch gun mount. The Phalanx CIWS turret spun toward the incoming threat, its barrels whirring up to readiness at over 4,000 rounds per minute. A single squeeze and the Caribbean sky would fill with white-hot tracers arcing toward the small craft. Above, the Seahawk dipped to 200 feet, rotor wash hammering the ocean surface as the sensor operator spotted silhouettes on the Venezuelan decks, helmets, bandanas, hands tightening on triggers. Then, a sharp electronic whine hit their headset. The Venezuelan fire control radar had just painted the Gravely. That was the final tripwire. Breach. We are painted, the pilot called. Copy. Maintain eyes. Hold unless fired upon. Inside the Eisenhower's Combat Direction Center, the tactical action officer walked through the rules of engagement, step by step, each one a tense lifeline, preventing a regional war. The US didn't shoot first. They waited. They endured risk. But they were second from unleashing everything if those boats made one wrong move. A long minute ticked by, stretched thin and electric. The Venezuelan formation slowed. For a breath, it looked like the tension might bleed off. Then one boat surged ahead, slicing the waves at 40+ knots straight toward Gravely's bow. Countermeasures ready, came the order. Chaff pods primed, lasers armed. One mistake and the sea would erupt. the Gravely's captain kept a steady hand. He knew the imbalance before him. 4 small boats against 2 destroyers and a carrier wasn't a battle. It was a funeral waiting for a name. At 6:06, the Seahawk reported movement, one vessel peeling away, then another. Their radar returns flickered, weakening. The formation was breaking under the pressure, but nobody relaxed. Not yet, because just a minute later, hull number 23 carved a hard arc back toward the carrier's southern flank. Whether confusion, pride, or miscommunication, no one knew. But on US radar, it looked unmistakably like an attack run. Contacts closing fast, bearing 2110. Instantly, the Mason shifted course between the carrier and the incoming boat. Its CRAM launcher rotated like a predator tracking prey. Missiles waited, hatches open. From above, the Seahawk called it out. Lead Venezuelan craft turning inside the Mason's wake. Distance 1.5 nautical miles. At that speed, that was seconds. Inside Mason's CIC, the voice of the tactical watch officer stayed steady. If that contact crosses 1,000 yards, fire a warning burst. The Venezuelan gunner made the mistake that nearly set the ocean on fire. He racked the charging handle of his deck gun. A single metallic click. The Seahawk's microphone caught it. Muzzle movement confirmed. Target inside 900 yards. Hold, the Gravely's captain said. Knuckles white on the armrest. Hold just a moment longer. And then at 6:08, the Venezuelan boat veered sharply away, water spraying high as the engine howled. The others followed, breaking into retreat. Contacts are withdrawing, came the final call. Maintain tracking. Weapons cold. A war that almost began had, by inches, been avoided. By 7 a.m., the sea had returned to its quiet rhythm. No engine echoes, no contacts on radar, just the Eisenhower strike group steaming north at 20 knots, holding formation with the same discipline as before the storm, but the confrontation was far from over. The battlefield had simply shifted from open water to the political arena, where narratives hit harder than bullets and misinformation spreads faster than torpedoes. Within 2 hours, Venezuelan state media pushed out a grainy, shaky video clip. It showed patrol boats slicing over open water, framed by bold narration claiming they had intercepted and repelled an American incursion. Back home, it played like a triumphant defense of sovereignty. But in Washington, the Pentagon moved faster. Satellite photos, detailed radar logs, and navigation tracks were released to the public cold, hard proof that the US group had remained more than 80 miles from Venezuelan shores, well inside international waters. The Navy called the incident reckless brinkmanship. Caracas called it defensive action. 2 statements that could both be argued true, yet entirely incompatible. Diplomats always summoned, after adrenaline has already cooled, scrambled to tamp down the sparks. No shots fired, no casualties, just a near miss that would be remembered by every sailor who lived through it. Because on board those ships, the truth hung heavier than any headline. The line between a tense standoff and a regional war had been razor thin, thinner than most civilians will ever understand. By the next morning, the Eisenhower quietly shifted farther north. The Venezuelan boats returned to port under renewed radio silence. Publicly, both sides pretended to move on. Privately, every officer knew the pattern. This would not be the last time nerves, miscalculations, and politics collided in those waters. People imagine modern warships as all-seeing giants, but the ocean can distort, hide, and deceive better than any battlefield on Earth. On a weak radar screen, in the dark or under heavy sea clutter, a carrier and a destroyer can look eerily similar massive metal hulls, throwing back complex echoes. Mix in old equipment, tired operators, and shifting weather, and even trained crews can mistake one warship for another. And that's exactly what happened here. The Venezuelan patrols relied on static shore-based radar feeds instead of live onboard sensors. Their coordinates came from a map that hadn't been updated after the US fleet repositioned overnight. In the Caribbean, a shift of even 30 miles is enough to turn a planned demonstration into an unintended confrontation. This is the dangerous phenomenon naval officers fear most, threat mirroring. One side interprets defensive posture as aggression, the other interprets a warning burst as an attack. Machines help, but judgment still rests in human hands, and one misread echo, one misheard transmission, one nervous decision can become the spark for a conflict no one truly wanted. Official reports later wrapped the event in careful language routine encounter, no escalation, but the sailors who stood at their posts knew better. It was the closest they had come to firing live rounds outside of wartime. Looking back, the narrowness of that margin feels terrifyingly clear. One flare, one lock tone. One commander's breath caught at the wrong second. That's all it would have taken to turn a morning patrol into a historical tragedy. At sea, there is no replay button, no second chances. Once a decision leaves your lips, you carry it. That brings us to the question that every sailor eventually faces. You're on the bridge. Alarms hammering. 4 fast craft tearing at you at 40 knots. Do you hold your fire and risk your ship? Or do you shoot first and live with the consequences forever? Drop your answer below. I want to know how you'd call that moment. And if you enjoyed this debrief, share it, like it, subscribe, and join the fleet to support more frontline stories grounded in real naval encounters. In the end, the Venezuelan squadron didn't just pick the wrong target, they picked the absolute worst day to trust a broken map